and long virtual science journalism and communications event that has ever happened. And now I am deeply honored to have in this table 4 amazing participants. In the first place, Bothina Osama, science journalist based in Cairo, editor of SciDevNet Middle East and North Africa. In the second place, Rosalind Reid, Executive Director for the Council for the Advancement of Science Writing, and Valeria Sabate, Senior Communications Associate, International Communications Lead at AAAS Science, which is the science family of journals, right? Okay. Just to remember the panelists, let's take only 5 minutes to reply all the questions for making sure we reply all the topics proposed. Right. The first questions for you guys is, from a general perspective, how do you perceive science communications or science journalism in the developing world?
Oh, yeah.
Reply according to your experience, because we've heard along all these series of talks, we've heard many people, science communicators, science journalism from Latin America, but it is important that to know that you also face issues and challenges in your countries to reach many people with science topics. Okay, so I would like to hear from you. What are the challenges you're facing now? Let's start with Rosalind Reid.
Okay,
please.
Thank you, Danielle. So yes, I am in the United States, and of course we are all united right now in the pandemic and facing many issues along with you that we all share. So that's the first thing at the top of my mind, of course. The pandemic has shown all of us how much science matters, how much science communication matters, and yet how much distrust of science and how many problems there are with communicating science to the public. So it has shown us in the US as well as in developing countries that the level of education and understanding of science in our audiences is very mixed and often very poor. But at the same time, that reporting science in real time is extremely important and difficult. So I think all of us share certain difficulties that are very prominent right now. And I believe that the pandemic is going to make change. For example, I believe that distrust of scientists, while it is still very high, is starting to be, people are needing to trust science. So during the pandemic, so that is changing public attitudes, and it is a time when everyone globally has a lot of opportunities to communicate what science is about. So in the developing world, I've had a lot of contacts with the journalists in Latin America and elsewhere, and they are just, everyone is struggling with misinformation coming out all over the place, and suspicion and superstition. Journalists are facing a lot of dangers from authoritarian governments in trying to report truth and having a lot of difficulties. So I believe that all of us are united in these things. I don't see a lot of difference between the developed and developing worlds from the US perspective, because we have had an authoritarian government that has been putting out a lot of misinformation, as you know. We have hope of change, but that is the most prominent thing. I have been, I'm going to finish soon. I've been traveling in Latin America and meeting with science journalists for more than 20 years. The issues have changed a great deal. It used to be that the problem was that there were so many big newspapers competing with popular science information, fads, crystals, astrology, health quackery, and that was the problem people talked about. It's still a problem, but we have many new ones. So I'll stop there.
Okay, please to the technical support to have the all microphones, mics, todos los micrófonos apagados. Thank you, Rosalind. So, as far as I can see, the challenges are similar in the United States than in Latin America, right?
Yes.
We cannot make a huge difference. Okay, we are different countries, but we cannot make huge differences because also we have people that doesn't trust science, that have some kinds of beliefs that can be harming to them. So well, let's see how to solve this this issue maybe in the next questions. But let's see what Bothina thinks. They represent the Arab world, part of Africa world. So Bothina, please tell, what do you think, or what challenges you're facing in science communications?
Yeah, actually, the Middle East and North Africa is very representative to what the developing world is facing with science journalism. I have the understanding that science journalism is built on mainly three pillars: journalists, researchers and scientists, and governments and science institutions. For the science journalists, I think we have a problem with lacking of training in this particular situation, because for example, in our region, there is barely any training specified for science journalism. We have only a master's degree in Algeria in the whole region. So actually we are in a big shortage of training and capacity building in science journalism. For the researchers, we still have problems with communication skills, because when you are a science journalist and speaking to a scientist or a researcher, if he is missing the main basics of communication and simplifying jargons for you as a journalist, you will be in a big problem for trying to get this information to the public, as you yourself is finding it difficult to understand. Another problem, I think, is the ice breaking. There is always this ice wall between scientists and researchers in the developing world and the science journalists, because they are somehow missing trust in them, finding problems with transparency somehow. And this is the other issue with the institutions and governments. In the developing world, there's always the transparency problem. Finding trustworthy information available from the governments and institutions is difficult, and take a lot of hard work for the journalist to make sure that he get the right information. So I think these are the main problems that we are facing in the developing world.
Thank you very much, Bothina. Very interesting and very similar situations that I find in comparison with Latin America. So let's introduce Deborah Blum, that has just joined. So Deborah, we are deeply honored to have you here. Welcome. She's a book author, science journalist, publisher of Undark, director of the Night Science Journalism program at MIT, and also Pulitzer winner. Thank you very much, Deborah, for being here. And let's keep the question with you, and then we finish with Valeria, okay? Deborah, the question is, what challenges, issues you've been facing all this time you've been doing science journalism, to introduce these kind of topics, especially to people that are not related with this? That is something that we have in common here in Latin America. It's very difficult to talk science to people who is not related to science. So what challenges do you find, maybe in the United States and maybe in Latin America, as you can see?
That's a great question. And thanks so much for having me be part of this smart panel. Really honored to be here. So I think that we do share a lot in common in terms of the challenges. And so, and I want to bring it up in a couple of ways. One is in the United States, just to start there, as we wrestle with how to overcome what I'm going to call science resistance. People who find the facts and truths of science inconvenient to their worldview, say. People who have been encouraged to dismiss the findings of science. I'm thinking about, the anti-vaccine movement, for instance, being an example of this, the anti-evolution movement being another example, climate change denial being another example of this. And so we find ourselves quite often in a situation where we are trying to tell stories about reality to a reality resistant audience. And so that is one of the problems that we often have to overcome. One of the others, and I have thought about this a lot as a longtime science journalist, is the challenge of sharing stories of science with people who don't feel comfortable with science, who were not taught in school in particular to think of science as part of their everyday life. And so when you're trying to persuade them that science should be part of their normal everyday decision-making process, you have to overcome sometimes the fear of science. Or in the United States, we'll often find that by the time people graduate from high school, they're afraid of science. It makes them feel stupid, right? Or in a class, a badly taught, I write about chemistry. So in a badly taught chemistry class from high school, the class or the teacher makes them feel stupid about chemistry, and then they just don't want to have anything to do with it. So you have to overcome that kind of resistance too, and find ways, techniques, ways to tell stories that overcome both of those hurdles. And I often think about it when I'm thinking about audiences. I won't go on and on here indefinitely, but I do think about audiences, right? Who am I telling this story to? And what is the best way to approach this particular audience? And so often when I started out, I would create a visual image in my head of someone I thought was not at all interested in what I was writing about. And I grew up in the American South, in Georgia and Louisiana, which is a famously science-resistant part of the United States in a lot of ways. It's come a long way, but you really did have that, both of the audiences that I was just describing, the resistant audiences there. And so when I would write a story, I would often create in my mind a picture of, I don't know why it was a woman, but I always had an elderly woman who still had her hair up in her hair rollers going down the driveway to pick up her newspaper. This was a while ago. And she hasn't even had the first cup of coffee. And the last thing she wants to do is read a story about science. So it was her. I would write my stories to her. How do I, and I find, because I am a visual writer, that that's one of the techniques that has been really helpful to me. Or if I'm writing a story today, I'll think about it like this. There's the people who are already around the campfire, the golden light of science and knowledge, and they're standing around the campfire. And so when I write a story for Scientific American about chemistry, that's going to be very different than the story I write. Think of other places I've written for the Daily Beast, or for BuzzFeed, or for audiences that are more general and less, attuned necessarily to the sort of insider view of science. And so that's actually the audience that most interests me, and I'll stop there. I'm not a writer who spends her time wanting to educate just a little more the people who are already around the campfire. I want to get it right. I want to tell the story with some nuance. I want to avoid traps like false balance. But the audience that interested me most is the science disaffected audience, the audience that's turned away from the campfire, if you will. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about how I can best tell stories to them. I hope that's helpful.
Interesting, interesting. And now we are going to talk about how to deal with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to mix the two questions for asking Valeria, right? That now that we already talked about the challenges that we have, right? To talk about science to people that is not interested in science in the daily life. So Valeria, what challenges you identify working from science, a place, an institution, organization like science, and how do you guys approach this problem? How do you guys try to solve this problem?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, and thank you as well for having me here today. There are a couple of things that we identify that has been echoed in this panel, and among those is hype that happens in science communications, and as well just omitting basic research, for example. So there's strategies that we do with our team by contextualizing the research findings, and not just about how the study advances the field, but as well its limitations. So that's something that we try to convey to our reporters so it can be better framed in the media. We also are facing the challenge with COVID, of course. So we are creating basically its own press package. We rolled out those notifications to the press to help them digest that complex research in a very fast-paced environment. But at the same time, as we work with authors that are not COVID related, we tell them that it's something that's happening where other research are just like being put on the side because COVID is like the main thing. But we try as well to do targeted pitching to reporters, and we try to identify themes within a specific research. So we might tie 3 research based on climate change, for example, and make it a trending topic. Other things that we do specifically with Latin America that we've seen is that institutions, for example, or even the same reporters from Latin America don't know about the freely available resources that we give to them to help in their reporting. So part of what we've done is we've traveled to Latin America to have these one-on-one conversations with the research institutions and with reporters, so they are aware that we are here to help. And another thing that we've been doing to bridge that gap in Spanish communications with Latin America is that we have our Spanish Twitter account where we just translate as the research comes out to try to convey as fast as possible the research that is coming out from our journals to Latin American audience. And we try to elevate there as well the research that is coming from the region. And as a last point, I would like to emphasize that we want to help reporters identify research that is coming from Latin America that is changing the way that science is done. And that is something that we are trying to do and investigate even more by having conversations with our editors. So as soon as we have more clarity in that area, I would love to share that with everyone here that is just interested of those research that are breaking through from the region. Thank you. Oh, you're
very interesting again. From all the things you've said, I like one of the strategies I liked the most is talk to people one-to-one, right? To be present where they are, to listen them. I think to be empathetic is one of the best strategies to reach them since or from journalism or science communication. What do you guys at the National Council of Science Writing do? Rosalind, you guys want to reach or you want to increase the quality and the quantity of science news reporting, right? So what you guys are doing to approach this problem? The mic, please.
Yes. Bothina mentioned training, and I have come to realize that there is a continual need for training. The kinds of training that we are interested in right now are, for one thing, training on statistics. We find every time that we give a workshop on how to communicate statistics and data, there are just huge numbers of science journalists and communicators who show up. It's because it's very hard and it's continually changing. And the pandemic is providing, again, just a fantastic example of how difficult it is and how much we need to keep training. So I think that international training is going to be very, very important. There are lots of things that have been mentioned that can be already here that can be addressed by training. We are an education nonprofit, so we are developing training programs, workshops, fellowships, little mini fellowships that people might take to get intensive training in some area and to meet others and network around an issue and topic. So we are developing, talking to the World Federation, in fact, about ethics issues. And when I say ethics, I mean conflicts of interest, this problem of how you are transparent about who is funding research, who is funding your work as a communicator or journalist, so that people can learn to trust their sources better because they are transparent, and understanding how to avoid influence and how to work against influence on the communication of science. So those are topics where I say training, but things we need to get together and discuss in all parts of the world so that the people who are doing the work can do it very ethically and to a very high standard. So that training is a big issue. Networking is another, and networking leads us to cross-border journalism. Yes, so projects like N más uno that are across countries and are regional are so important. The other thing that I'm working with organizations that are pushing different models of science journalism that we hope will be more sustainable in developing countries. Cross-border meaning you don't send Science or Nature or some international publication, the New York Times doesn't send a reporter out to a country to write about the science or what's going on with Zika or COVID in that country. The reporting is done from within, and we train and strengthen and network the reporters in the country to work with international countries, because as Deborah said, they have the right audience in their head, the local reporters in the country, including with indigenous languages and cultures, how to communicate to people. We in the US have no idea. So we are trying to change the model so that the international reporter doesn't fly in an airplane and tell you what your science is about. We need to build up the communication from within the countries. The World Conference, I hope, in Colombia will help advance that, as well as these sessions that you're doing right here.
Thank you very much, Rosalind. Well, cooperation, networking, funding, education, and a lot of leadership as well, right? And one of the things you've said that I really, really like, and I would really love that we can apply more and undertake more, is reaching all these local people, decentralize our work. This is very, very important. Thank you, Rosalind. How about Bothina? How are you approaching this from side dev? Bothina, we listen.
Yeah, I think we have the same. Yeah, I think Rosalind say it all. We are doing the same. We are depending on the local research, local reporters to do all the work. We are building capacity in local reporters by somehow mentorship their work and try to find potential reporters and build capacity in them to create local reports on science from the developing world. I think this is the main mission of SciDevNet, not just to cover science in the developing world, but also to build capacity in local science journalists in the developing world who can cover science happening in the developing world. I think we do this both by direct training. For example, we have a course called Script, which is particularly a curriculum that was adopted by some universities in Africa. And now we are trying to work on other versions. It's now available in English, but we are trying to make it available in other languages like Arabic and French. And it's a curriculum for undergraduate journalists to learn more about science journalism. We also do a different training. We are trying to train journalists with researchers in the same room, trying to breaking ice between them. So we are doing this kind of training for science communication skills between journalists and researchers in the same room. This is for training, also for, we are trying to set a trustworthy platform for audiences. As Deborah said, that the audience are the main target of us. So making a trustworthy platform for audiences in the developing world so they can understand science through and make sure that they are getting what they call it, fact-checked and very good information about science, not misinformed. So building this trustworthy platform is difficult and take time, and for example, we have a successful experience in the Arab world because, you know, science journalism is missing a lot in the Arab world. There are not many platforms that present science journalism. So when we started 2013, the Arabic version of SciDevNet, we was shocked that we have a lot of audiences. The Arabic edition was getting more audiences than any other edition of SciDevNet, which was a bit weird, but we thought that this is because the audience were missing such a trustworthy platform to depend on to get their science-related information. So I think those are some clues that we are building on in SciDevNet to help in the science journalism situation.
Excellent. How important is to build a trustworthy source, right? In the middle of a war for the attention of the people, and with many wrong and false messages. So thank you very much, Faina, for that. So let's hear Deborah now. You now are working at Andark, Deborah. You are doing an excellent, during all your life, have been doing an excellent journalistic job. And how do you approach this huge problem?
That's a great question. So I co-founded Andark with the editor-in-chief of the magazine, Tom Zeller. We were in 2016, and we've been, one of the things we decided early on, and I think this is true for any science publication, is, where do we sit? What's the area that we feel isn't being fully served or explored in a consistent way? And so Andark is really focused on the intersection of science and society and the pull and push between those two forces. So we don't do beautiful stories about the structure of leaves or the sparkle of snowflakes, or we're really focused on that one area, and we've consistently done that. And so we've grown. I was giving a talk recently in 2017, we had about 70,000 page views a month. And now we're at about 600,000 over those last 3 years, which just tells us that that is a niche that's really important, that people are hungry for that information in which they look at the way, science affects society, and also the way society pushes back against science. picking up in a different way on something that Roz mentioned, we also believe that having reporters on the ground who know what they're talking about and know the culture and know the audience and know the area is really important. So one of the major international stories we did was on particulate pollution, PM.25 air pollution, and it was called Breathtaking. And we identified the 7 places in the world where you saw the highest levels of that kind of pollution. And then we hired local journalists. So there was a story about Chile, in which the reporter is from Chile. And there's a story about, and the same series had a story about Nigeria, in which the reporter was from Nigeria. And so we recognize that. I actually was thinking recently, we have a reporter that we work with frequently who's based in Afghanistan, and we don't send reporters, not that it would be easy now to parachute into Afghanistan, but here's someone who lives there and really knows the issues and did a wonderful story for us on the challenges for medics and hospital facilities in Afghanistan at this time period. If you went and looked at that, I mean, it's just a stunning piece. And so again, we're trying to serve this mission of illuminating this one intersection. I want to just briefly also echo everyone on the importance of training as an ongoing thing, right? Not that you just graduate from journalism school or wherever and now you know everything, but science journalism, I think, more than many aspects or many areas of journalism, has been really dedicated to continuing to make people think and sharpen their skills and improve things. And SciDev is a wonderful example of that. And CASW, where Roz is a wonderful example of that. And I want to briefly mention a couple of resources that you all might find useful. We just did a soft launch of the the new Night Science Journalism website this week. We're not actually going to announce it till next week, but if you went to the KSJ website this week, and that would be ksj.mit.edu, there are 2 new free resources for journalists around the world. One of them is a fact-checking resource. And if you go to the fact-checking page section of the new KSJ website, you will find training for fact checkers, how to do your own fact checking, a checklist for fact checkers at publications around the world, a free teaching module for universities. We started out having 7 universities that were using that in their classes, and we're now up to 30 in the United States. A database of fact checkers. So if you're looking for a fact checker, you can actually search that database by both experience and specialty. And we also just published a free digital handbook for people who edit science. And you will also find that on the KSJ website now. The digital handbook for science editors. There's chapters by Apoorva Mandavelli from the New York Times and Laura Helmuth from Scientific American, and a statistician from Germany. And you can go through that and it will walk you through everything from how to edit for controversial science to how to see the red flags of statistics as an editor. And it is free. It's available as an online resource, and it's also a downloadable PDF, so that if what you wanted was to actually print it out and have it, or just have it as a permanent thing without always going online, you can do that too. And we're really proud of both of those things. We hope to expand them, and we're actually working on the science editing, both of those projects with the folks at SciCommX in Dubai to do free online webinars and workshops, one for fact checkers and then a series of training webinars for people who are interested in refining their science editing skills. So I want to both emphasize that and let you guys know that that actually, although we haven't announced it, is available now.
Thank you very much, Deborah, for all those gifts that you're giving. I'm sure it will be very useful for our associations and see how we can adapt all this knowledge to our realities. I'm sure it's gonna be very, very useful. Thank you very much, Deborah. So let's talk in this last round of questions about what opportunities your institutions or yourselves maybe you identify for the future now onwards. What science family journals is doing for I don't know, maybe Latin journalists in the United States, or maybe opportunities that you identify for Latin American journalists in Latin America, you know. So let's talk some of this, Valeria, please.
Yeah, happy to. So we as well at the Science Family Journals believe that there are many opportunities to work with our Latin American colleagues, and we do this by different ways. One is to encourage, yes, the regional science that is coming from Latin America because they're right next to that institution. So we know that the newsrooms in Latin America are smaller, or they might be cutting staff. So the way that we try to help them is through that targeted pitching, is to let them know, hey, you have a research coming out that is actually done in Brazil, or it's like a leading scientist from Colombia. So they know, and help them when they go through all these materials and emails that they're receiving every week, to highlight that, to help with that process of reporting. As well, we have a AAAS Mass Media Fellowship, and I have been part of the panel that does the screening for Spanish-speaking reporting to determine which candidates move forward. And I would love to see more Spanish-speaking reporters applying for that, because that's where scientists get assigned to newsrooms, and then they gain that science communication experience, and they are assigned to Spanish-speaking outlets. So that's something that I would definitely encourage. And I as well think it's important that institutions in Latin America, and this is something that I always emphasize, that once we introduce ourselves and what we offer, it's important that they create their own news releases and they add their unique voice to an issue, because usually, sure, you're going to have the MIT news release or from Stanford, and that's great, but we also want to hear from the perspective from these Latin American voices. So that's something that we also emphasize. And the News from Science desk, which is editorially independent, as well have a correspondent in Mexico. And when sometimes I receive pitches from reporters that something's going on in the region, I forward it to her and say, hey, this is going on and this could be a potential story. So that's something that I am always there to help Latin America, and as well authors. I had a case actually this week that an author wanted to translate a letter published in Science, and it was already done in Spanish. So what we did is just like, we did a cross promotion. We did this with Spain, and then we did this through our Spanish social media account. We have done bilingual online sessions too. So feel free to reach out to me. And if you think that we can do a project where just create a conversation, I would love to chat. Like, Science Magazine is open to that, and we want to hear more from Latin America.
Awesome, amazing. So there's a lot of opportunity, especially if we contact Valeria from Science Family of Journalists, journals. Thank you, Valeria. We're gonna take into account. We're gonna try to summarize all these opportunities and show this for all Latin American journalists that are linked to our associations. Thank you very much. Rosalind, can you tell us more about what opportunities for people from Latin America, have with the National Association of Science Writing? Microphone.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Yes, my organization is separate from the National Association. I'm just going to mention that so it's clear I am not speaking for NASW, but we work together on many international projects. And I think that the key thing that I would emphasize is to get in touch with us with ideas, because we are developing new programs. And in many cases, my organization works with funders such as the Kavli Foundation, the Moore Foundation, who are interested in international programs. So each time we develop a kind of training, we would love to have people internationally who are interested in developing that same training in their country. We have to find sometimes extra resources. In some cases, the same training will work, but we need to translate, yes? We need to find people to deliver the content in other countries. So, for example, I'll just say, we had a wonderful workshop on ethics with a discussion of new frontier science that is sort of scary, like neuroscience, where people are doing crazy things with the brain. We created a video of that session. We have closed captions only in English. I think it would be a kind of session that would work very well in other languages by just adding the captions in the language. This is not hard to do. So as we develop training materials, information, just like Deborah's handbooks, it's really lovely to have partners who are in other countries who want to use that content for their own audiences and adapt it. So the main thing I would say is that every program that we have has an international possibility of being used in other countries, and we want always to explore that as we develop programs. So as I mentioned, we're right now developing training around data and statistics issues, and then around these ethics and transparency issues. So those are topics where we would love to know what your agenda would be and what your audience would be and how we might deliver it, just use the same content or redevelop it for your audience. I have funders who are interested in us developing the same content for international uses. So it's basically get in touch with me on those topics if you are interested. Yeah. Daniel, your mic is off now.
Oh my God.
I thought it was me.
So one of them is data, okay, and the other one is transparency, okay?
Yes, ethics generally. I want to be not very specific because I don't know what your ethics issues are in countries. Sometimes it's government control of information, sometimes it's other things. But I'm not going to dictate the programming. If I work with you as a partner, I want to hear your issues. Yeah.
Absolutely. These are very interesting topics, ethics and transparency. I think immediately about people that is doing media entrepreneurship, right? That is starting media business or media outlets. And they want to learn all these issues. They don't want to enter into a conflict of interests, and they are sometimes fearful of this situation because they are journalists and they don't want to fall in any vice. So I think it's very, very interesting. So thank you very much, Rosalind. We definitely going to put in contact with you. Thank you very much. And let's talk about Bothina. What do you think are the opportunities for journalism in countries like us? You've been working at SciDev. We're big fans of SciDev. So tell us more, please, Bothina.
Actually, SciDev, as you know, has a big edition for Latin America in Spanish language. And I think that particularly the practical guides that SciDevNet make available in Spanish is very helpful for science journalists to make the first steps and learn more about how to be a science journalist or how to communicate science in a good way. So I think practical guides in Spanish edition is very helpful. Also, I think that having some training courses like script in Spanish would be another helpful issue for undergraduate and for training for science journalists. in different countries that might face some problems with qualified training or science journalism training, because I think not all the Latin American countries are the same. There are more opportunities in some countries and difficulties in others. So I think online training would be helpful for countries that are facing problems with availability of trainings. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Bothina.
Thank you.
So you all know where to find SciDev Latin America, and I think you are doing a great job. It's been always a reference to me. Thank you very much, Bothina. So let's see what the MIT Night Science Journalism Fellowship is offering for Latin American students, and what opportunities do you identify? Deborah, what do you think is the trend to make journalism, science journalism in Latin America?
That's a really important point. So KSJ, as you know, is a longtime fellowship program, and we didn't this year, but almost every year we bring in journalists from around the world to spend a year training at Harvard and MIT and fund their year here. And we always try to look at a geographically representative body. So Ivan Carrillo from Mexico was one of our recent fellows. Pablo Correa from Colombia was a fellow. Debbie is no longer here. Angela is no longer here, but was a fellow. And so we've traditionally done outreach and training in Latin America. But we recognize that you can't just train 10 journalists from around the world a year and have the kind of impact when you do greater outreach. So this is something we're looking at now. I've been doing some work and support with Inquire First, which does training of journalists in Latin America. And I'm actually giving my third presentation in a series on training medical journalists that they've been running in November. And I'm on the board of Serapiera in Brazil, and that is a nonprofit that is involved. And I've gone back and forth with some of their ideas, but they're looking to actually fund journalists specifically at publications around Brazil and make sure there's support for science journalists around the country, not just in the big urban areas, but science journalists in smaller regional areas. And they're a really smart group. So we've tried as an organization at MIT to try to connect with other programs that are doing training in Latin America and to try to support that. And the last part of this, I think, is something that I'm reminded of at this meeting that came up earlier, but I think is really important. And that's the importance of networking in figuring out how to do smart training. I mean, many years ago, I was on the board of the World Federation of Science Journalists, and I've certainly been to and helped organize a number of World Federation conferences. And like Roz, I'm excited to see what comes out of the meeting in Colombia. But I think a meeting like you are having here, Daniel, where you're connecting different people who are interested in the subject and you're building networks so that we know what each other are doing, and we can think, how can I best support that? What might be a creative way for me to put a little time or provide staffers or anything that we can do to try to help each other out, because like I said, I think science journalism has done uniquely well at this. If you look at the many specialties of journalism, I don't think you see this necessarily with, say, sports journalism. These kinds of how do we build these international networks and do a better job of sharing. And I'm really proud of us as a profession. But I think what you are doing here is capacity building. And as we listen to what each other is saying, we can think about, should we talk about that further directly, or how could I better support that? And so when I had a number of conversations with Lynn Walker at Inquire First, for instance, I have one staffer who is fluent in Spanish. She's the associate editor of Undark. And so she's now one of the judges when they're working on their cross-border projects. They have a series of judges that try to evaluate them. So one of my staffers is a volunteer for that. And those, you know, are ways that we can build, starting small, and then I hope build something bigger.
Absolutely agree with what you just said. Well, I don't want to take the credit for this articulating. You know, it's not only my work, it's a teamwork of organizations. I especially thank to Ximena Serrano and Tania Balbuena, who've been working from the Association of Colombian Science Journalism. Tania especially has been working a huge work of, you know, calling people and messaging, and Ximena also always you know, open to collaborate, and this is huge. I underline something that what you said, Deborah. Building capacity is a key point in any community, and I think that we are deeply honored that you are here and you know, are open to contact us and collaborate each other. Thank you very much for that. So this has been a great and very enriching meeting. Thank you very much to Rosalind, and thank you very much to Valeria, Bothina, who is in Cairo now. Thank you. And Deborah, thank you very much for your great views, perspective, and also gifts that have given to us the knowledge you have shared with us. Thank you very much. This has been another panel of the Science Journalism Forum Latin American edition. My name is Daniel Meza, and let's see each other in the next panel, in the next table. We're going to talk with Latin American journalists about science communications and gender, a very novel topic.
Okay, thank you for being in the Science Journalism Forum Latin edition. Please keep enjoying the other session. Bothina, Deborah, Val, Rosalind, thank you and see you soon.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.